Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth, Van Halen. Here we go. Now, I am of a certain age, 52. My first ever piece of music that I ever purchased was in 1983, late 1983. I purchased the 1984 Van Halen record. I'm talking a vinyl piece of plastic, big old disc. Yeah. Okay. I went into the record store and lifted up this big record, and I purchased it with my hard-earned money as a youngster. So that was the first piece of music I ever purchased. Van Halen, 1984 with David Lee Roth. That was, you can really kind of say, their coming out record. They were in business before that, but who do you like better, Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth? Now, both guys are great, and there's really no right or wrong. It's just preference. But I'm old enough to have. I am not so old where I'm like, oh, David, old, David's the best. David, oh, David Lee Roth. And I'm not so young where it's like, all I know is Sammy. I was right on that cuspis. I just started getting into music in 1983, 84. And that's when Van Halen with David Lee Roth ended and Sammy Hagar started. So I got kind of the best of both worlds, no pun intended, if you know what that means. So I think they're both great in their own way. It's kind of like comparing Mercedes to BMW. Both great cars, a little bit different. So David Lee Roth is a pure showman, singer. Okay? Sammy is also a showman and a singer, but in addition, a musician. Now, I'm not saying that's better or worse, but it's just an added, I guess, bonus, if you will. David Lee Roth, Van Halen, was more pure classic rock, where Sammy Hagar Van Halen was more pop 80s rock, just at the height where all that synthesizer stuff was happening. So we have, and you can hear it in the albums, from the first Van Halen to, the last Van Halen, if you will, but you see an evolution, right? And that middle point, that 1984 album, is when we start to hear Eddie playing synthesizer. And then that carried on and became a big, pronounced element in the latter Sammy Hagar years. So that is one big, important audio distinction you can hear. That synthesizer plays a bigger role, at least, in the Sammy years versus the Dave years. So there's more of an 80s pop to the Sammy, Sammy years. And David, again, more classic rock, Again, no right or wrong, but I prefer more of that's when I started coming into my own as a teenager. I prefer more of the Sammy years, because that's when I was getting into my teenage years. And also David Lee Roth Van Halen was more about, I guess more aggressive rock, if you will, not into the big monster love ballads. David Lee Roth ain't talking about love. Sammy Hagar, how do I know it's love? Like Sammy Hagar is all about the lamenting and almost the whining, if you will. Oh, love, and it's more of a softer Van Halen. And again, Sammy did some hard stuff. 5150 record. 5150 right out of the first song right out of the gate, very, very hard. Not mushy, but there was more mushy songs with Sammy, and there was none that I know of. No mushy songs with Dave, zero. And I think Dave would even say that too. But there was a ton of mushy songs with Sammy Hagar, and I loved it. I ate it up. So that's a big distinction. You can get into the fact that, obviously they both had their breakups, this and that, but that's more just ancillary stuff. I'm talking about just the music. I think that Dave, it was definitely more of a circus almost, where Sammy was more of a musician. And we know that because Sammy came from, I think it was Montrose, or just the Sammy Hagar band, right? Can't Try 55, before he got into Van Halen. He didn't need Van Halen. Like, Sammy even said he took a pay cut to get into Van Halen. That's how much he wanted to be in Van Halen. He was already making millions. He didn't need Van Halen. But he was and is an accomplished musician where, again, David Lee Roth, more of just the frontman singer. I would make the argument, this is again kind of off the table, but just on a side note, I kind of like the history of stuff sometimes. David Lee Roth, very, very smart man. Not that Sammy's dumb. Sammy's not dumb. But I mean, David Lee Roth, much more eclectic, much more bohemian, much more of a Renaissance man, where, yeah, is Sammy too in his own right, but Dave, much more colorful, eclectic. I mean, I would even say, and I don't know either of these men that well, but from what I see publicly, I mean, David Lee Roth, after Van Halen, became a New York City EMT for fun. Didn't have to do that. Wow. So like, in a way, he has a philanthropy about him. And I'm not saying that Sammy never gave money or never helps people, but I mean, and then Dave, rock climbing and martial arts, and Sammy did too in a weird way. So Sammy did a lot of boxing in his younger years. So, but yeah, I guess in many ways they're very similar. But it's just that I think that Dave is more colorful, where Sammy's songs were more colorful, but Dave's songs were more kind of dark and kind of gritty, party songs like Jump and Panama, no doubt. But those songs were much more heavy rocking, where Sammy's songs, again, right? I mean, How Do I Know When It's Love, Amsterdam, which I was just listening to, what do you call it? 5150, Why Can't This Be Love? Dreams. I mean, Dreams is, just an inspiring, symphony of just hope and, flying higher into the bright blue sky, and just that song Dreams just picks you up, where Dave wouldn't sing a song like that. Dave would sing a song like Nightmares, but yeah, Sammy was more, I guess, romantic in a way. Not that Dave is not in his own private life, maybe, because I think he was dating, who was he dating? One of those hot 80s people, Sheila E. or no, he was dating, not Sheila E. He dated, the chick from the Prince group there, the singer Prince. I forgot her name. Allegedly. Oh, that wasn't even alleged. One of those hot models. But my point is, yeah, Dave was, as a person, more colorful, but as a singer for Van Halen, a little bit more, I guess, dark, if you will. Not goth, but Sammy definitely more about love and, we're going to do it. Yeah, we're going to get higher and higher. Hey, I love you. I love. Dave wasn't doing that, So, and even the song Jump is not a song like Dreams. Jump is not saying jump to jump. There's a interview with David Lee Roth and what's the guy's name? Joe Rogan, where he talks about the song Jump. Jump is not about inspiration. Jump is about someone that was going to jump off a building, and Dave was like, jump, do it, just do it. So that's what that song's about. It's kind of dark, actually, where Sammy would never sing that. Sammy would sing, again, right? We're getting higher and higher. Get up, where Dave is more kind of taunting and sarcastic. Again, no right or wrong, just what your preference is. So what's your preference? Who do you think, Sammy or Dave? Now, also, you could say, well, no, we can quantify this because we know who sold more albums. Not so fast. Dave did 7 albums with Van Halen. Sammy only did 4. So, of course, Dave's going to have more sales than Sammy. But when you compare the apples to apples, let's do 4 albums to 4 albums. I don't know. I think you're hard pressed. I think Sammy might beat him out with more sales. Again, doesn't mean that someone's better, but if you want to say, oh, well, Dave did more sales, more money, I don't know about that. Again, compare 4 to 4, not 7 to 4. So, I mean, again, and big shout out to Gary Sharon. I think they shafted him. I think Gary Sharon should have gotten at least another record deal. You got to give the guy, maybe the first one wasn't so hot, but give him a second, give him a second album. So there's really 3 singers of Van Halen, but really it's the 2 big ones, right? Sammy or Dave? Sammy or Dave? I like Sammy. I tend to listen to Sammy more. Love my 1984 album. First piece of music I ever purchased. It turned me on to rock. And yeah, I'm a big Sammy fan. What about you?